And actually, will we all become so used to showing some kind of biometric ID that we completely, that we end up with some kind of passport for doing really mundane things for the long run, even when the pandemic's over? I think there's a really slippery slope there.
Okay. All right. Good to talk to you all. Thanks very much indeed.
Now, Ed Miliband is calling for an electric vehicle revolution to boost jobs in the car manufacturing industry and encourage people to make the environmentally friendly choice.
The Shadow Business Secretary says his plan would make owning an electric car an option for everyone. And he joins us now. Good morning, Mr. Miliband.
Good morning, good to be with you.
What do you think, firstly, about vaccine passports? We just heard from the Director of Liberty. It's all right if you want to travel abroad, that makes sense, but it's a slippery slope if you start saying you can't go for a drink without showing a biometric ID on your phone, for instance.
I think we need to be pretty cautious about this. I think what the Prime Minister did yesterday shows the dangers of sort of making up policy on the hoof. I mean, we'll obviously look at what the government comes forward with, but on the pubs issue, whole sets of questions come up. Why should we pass the buck to the landlords to make these decisions? What about people like pregnant women, for example, who are currently not being advised to have the vaccine? What if the vaccine hasn't been rolled out to young people yet? So I think sort of questions abound about this. And, I do think there is a bit of a distinction between foreign travel, where it may be necessary because other countries ask for it. And as somebody said earlier, I think, for things like yellow fever and so on, you have to have a certificate. And these other issues, I tend to think, persuasion is much better than compulsion. In other words, let's get people vaccinated, as many people vaccinated as possible. And then if government wants to come forward and say, well, this is why further restrictions are necessary, and here's the evidence, fine. But I think, it's slightly indisciplined what the Prime Minister did yesterday.
But what would you do? I mean, we're talking about just months away. It could be, pubs will open in just a couple of weeks for outdoor drinks and also indoors a few weeks after that. What would you do if you were in power now, then? What would be your solution right now when we know there is perhaps an issue with vaccine supply? We know that most people probably who frequent a lot of these pubs and bars are young people under the age of 50 who haven't been vaccinated. So what would you do in this circumstance right now?
We'd be led by the scientists. I mean, look, the fundamental thing here is that we'd be led by the scientists. And if the scientists are saying that it is safe to open pubs and indeed restaurants, that's what we should be doing. And obviously the government's got their review mechanism in place to look at that. That's why I don't really understand sort of how this policy sort of emanates.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the scientists very clearly say vaccines save lives. I mean, that's the bottom line, isn't it? So I can imagine if you ask the scientists would say yes. If perhaps, as we've said to Dr. Hillary, or we've heard from Dr. Hillary this morning, perhaps if going to the pub with a vaccine passport incentivises people to get the vaccine, that might be, what the scientists recommend.
Well, it may be. I don't think that's really the thing that's going to persuade people to get the vaccine. I think. Look, what we've done brilliantly in this country at rolling out the vaccine and people taking up the vaccine, and that's the key thing. Is the campaign of persuasion to people take up the vaccine. That is the biggest priority now. If the government's got evidence that this is necessary for people to go to hospitality venues, let's look at that evidence. That isn't quite what the Prime Minister said yesterday. And indeed, if it was necessary, why would you be leaving it up to individual landlords? If this was really a public health measure, you wouldn't be saying, well, it's going to be a landlord discretion. You'd say, this is the government's view. This is what's safe. So there are many, many unanswered questions about this. And I'm not going to make up policy on the hoof. I'm going to listen to what the government says, but they've got a lot of questions to answer.
What do you make of what is happening with vaccine supply? The EU yesterday still sort of sabre-rattling over potentially blocking exports from their countries. The UK and the EU have come out with a joint statement, but this is a pretty unseemly row, isn't it, when we're talking about a life-saving measure?
It is, and it's in all of our interests for people everywhere to be vaccinated. We don't want, if you like, vaccine nationalism from any country. I haven't liked what the EU's been saying during this crisis in terms of these issues. I don't think they should be sort of making threats and so on. I don't think threats are good from any side. I feel moderately encouraged that overnight there's been a joint statement from the UK and the EU dialing down the temperature, and that's got to be what is necessary. You know, we've done very well in relation to vaccines and the vaccine rollout, and that's a good thing. We want the EU to be able to vaccinate as many of its citizens as quickly as possible as well. It's in their interests, it's in all of our interests, but, you know, the sort of sabre rattling is not the answer.
Okay. Ed, can I ask you another question? Where's your flag? You don't seem to have one. There's not one behind you, not one on your lapel. I mean, are you proud to be British?
I haven't got one today, but, you know, people show their patriotism in different ways. I love this country, and I love the way this country in particular has stepped up during this crisis. And my patriotism is about how we transform this country so that the way it's run matches the spirit of who the British people are. And I think what we've seen in this crisis is in lots of ways, whether it's the pay of key workers or the funding of our public services or the welfare safety net that we have, that our country isn't run in the interests of most people.
Why have we got
to change?
Why have we got politicians, including Keir Starmer? Why have we got politicians today, suddenly from nowhere, feeling like they need to have the flag right behind them? There's a shot of Keir Starmer, your leader. This never happened before. Why suddenly this need to fly the flag?
Also, this follows in the footsteps of the Culture Secretary, Oliver Dowden, saying that there is new guidance that the flag will be flown on UK buildings every day now, whereas previously it was raised on government buildings on only around 20 designated days.
And that's absolutely fine. You know, actually, you say it's never happened before. I know it was a long time when I was leader, but someone was pointing out to me the other day that in one of our logos we had the Union Jack. So, I don't think it has never happened before. Keir Starmer wants to be the Prime Minister of this country. I don't find it remarkable that he appears in front of a Union Jack.
Electric cars is what you are trying to persuade us all to get enthusiastic about. Sure. There's an issue, isn't there, on price? They're pretty pricey. People are worried about how far they can drive without running out of juice. And there is an issue with, you know, how long it takes to charge. The electric cars are not going to be taken up until they are made extremely accessible to everybody.
You're completely right, Susanna. You're completely right. And look, we've got massive change coming in this country. The government has said, and we actually agree with them on this, that we won't be able to buy new petrol and diesel cars from 2030. And what I'm saying today is we need an electric car revolution, but it's got to benefit consumers and it's got to benefit manufacturers and not just the richest. And at the moment, the government's announced the ban, the 2030 ban, but it's not stepping up and taking the bold action necessary to make this fair. Now, what does that mean? What are we calling for? Interest-free loans, long-term interest-free loans for consumers so that we can expand access, not just to the richest. A scrappage scheme so that people can trade in their old cars for electric cars. And crucially, and this is a global race, help for our manufacturers to build the gigafactories, the battery factories that are absolutely essential if we're going to tackle our car industry. You know, I believe that the climate transition can create a better country, but it's only going to happen with bold government action. We're not seeing it at the moment. Government needs to step up.
I presume you've got one.
I haven't yet. It's a work in progress.
What? Practice what you preach.
It's a work in progress. We're actually on our way to buying one before lockdown. It is going to happen, I promise you. I have bought an electric bike, but it's on its way.
So hang on. So you're pushing for everyone to have an electric car, and you don't have one yourself.
I'm pushing to make it accessible. Look, I'm pushing to make it accessible.
It's not even accessible to you.
But you haven't even experienced one yourself. I mean, you'd like to think if you're going to tell us all to get an electric car and encourage the nation to embrace electric cars, you would have trialled it out for some time and can tell us whether it's any good or not.
Well, I've definitely been in an electric car, and look, it's the way we've got to go. It's the way we've got to go for climate reasons. This is the point. This change is coming. This change can benefit our country. I want to be part of that change. Look, maybe,
but not yet.
Like other consumers, there are barriers, and we've got to break down those barriers.
I think leading by example. Have you managed to persuade your leader, Keir Starmer, to have an electric car?
I don't know which vehicle he drives. You'll have to ask
Persuaded
him.
anybody to get one?
Well, no, I think lots of people are getting them, but we've got to make it accessible. I think this absolutely makes the point.
OK, all right. Ed Miliband, thanks very much indeed. Good to talk to you this morning.
Thank you.